Deleted session, July 5, 1978. Now, Robert feels a strangeness in the air this evening. Several important projects are clicking together in Framework 2, and Robert feels as if some dimensions in space-time are warped. The effect of events in Framework 2 is constant, but there are moments in your terms of particle acceleration where walk down there seems to quiver the edges of your reality in Framework 2. This is such a time. This is particularly true in terms of Robert's physical condition. His dream did inform him of that, but this also means that the mental conditions of limitation are being released enough so that other areas of your experience are now ready to come together in newer fashions. It is very difficult to try to explain the nature of any event, or the ways in which any given specific mental attitude can release or inhibit the expression of any given series of events. Probabilities do not operate alone, isolated, but largely in terms of conglomerations, so that, say, like does attract like. In your cases, changes of attitude have begun to alter Framework 2, so that a corner is turned. In other terms, this can be likened to the discovery of a new world or land that has existed, of course, but whose existence was unsuspected. It has still to be explored. So those kinds of changes are in the air, so that many of the connections you have made in many areas will click together in another fashion, more beneficially and more purposefully. Robert's standing and walking seemed to happen suddenly. The inner work had been going on. He will, of course, have other and more extensive such experiences, but overall the mental work is now beginning to be strong enough in your framework, so that more and more results in your turns will show themselves. Robert has been remembering the idea of effortlessness, and that is all important. Those changes automatically again and quite effortlessly reach out into those other areas of your lives, for fear does not then hold back beneficial development. I have a suggestion. It cannot harm either of you to try it, and it is this. Try to take it for granted that distractions have a meaning in Framework 2 that is not as yet obvious in Framework 1. Sometimes events that seem distracting, annoying, or that happen out of context actually are parts of other patterns, larger ones that are part of Framework 2 activity. I gave you one example that you understood clearly. When I spoke about the individual who wanted to catch a plane, all of his plans went wrong. His efforts seemed to be challenged at every turn. He was beset by difficulties. He missed his plane. The plane crashed. If he knew later of the plane's fate, he thought, how lucky for me that my plans were thwarted. If he never learned of the crash, he might think that he was simply beset by distractions, and that his efforts went nowhere. The same thing can happen, however, where no crashes or disasters are involved, and no dangers are implied, but where events that do not fit into your implied pattern intrude into it. Each such event, again, is indeed connected with your own overall intents, and may be working toward them, but in a way that appears disruptive. An encounter, for example, that is nuances today, may suddenly spark a new insight tomorrow, or appear in your own work in an entirely different form that you do not recognize, simply because you are not used to looking at such distractions in this kind of creative light. The benefits of such distractions do indeed, I admit, seem quite invisible to you, and in your joint experiences they often appear simply as nuances. Therefore, you are hardly ever able to follow them through so that you can connect any particular insight or auspicious event with the originating distraction. I can quite honestly compare such distractions with, say, the distracting thought that might take you from a familiar train of thought into another new mental territory. The distracting elements are exaggerated, however, because of your joint misunderstandings on the subject. The visitors, for example, are not numerous. In many cases, however, the contact alone opens up different aspects of your own consciousness in response. It is almost as if you were able to look at our material from your own viewpoint, and yet, at other levels, to perceive it from your visitors' viewpoints. That adds to the richness of the material. For you bring to the sessions not only your own experience, but the same experience of others. You must understand that I am not telling you not to limit visitors. I am telling you that creativity often parades under the guise of disruption, and the word is parades. Robert read Holy, and at Young Code noted this evening. They said Robert felt the code was disruptive, though he likes our friend. Robert's concentration so briefly upon Holy's book was picked up by Ed Young, and Robert's opinion of Holy's work was picked up by Ed Young, who has the same opinion of the scientific establishment. There are endless points of organization, intent, and interest that unite events. Many of your distracting events have uniting qualities that escape your joint notice. The ramifications of Framework 2's activity, of course, require great reorientation on your part, and necessitate a changed view of daily events. In that view, it will be seen that all events work together, your purposes, when you realize that they do. Otherwise, you run into the old problem of contradictions, and if you believe that distractions are simply that distractions, in competition with your work, then they will certainly seem to be in your experience with a changed attitude. However, you will be able to follow those distractions, transformations. That is, you will be able to glimpse how this distraction ends up in that insight, or how that distraction actually initiated a beneficial event. When in the past, everything seemed unrelated, events fit into each other. They are composed of a psychological thickness. I hope to give you more sessions on the nature of events, in a package, so to speak. Though Robert will have to be at his best since the concepts are so difficult verbally. Give us a moment. The simple event of Robert reading Holy's book. Robert began reading certain ideas with which he is not yet consciously familiar. Some of those ideas, however, were picked up in California. My last session was in a way the result of Robert's begrudging decision to take time out to read the book. It got his attention. I am aware of his emotional ideas, of course, and to an important degree I am free of his prejudices. But more than that, in certain terms, my consciousness is not limited, so that I can take from Robert's understanding his good comprehension of where science is, and then tell you where an enlightened science might go. More important, I can tell you that atoms, for example, are primarily consciousness. Objects are the result of a specialized perception. I can perceive your objects as objects or not, but the true nature of reality must come from a study of consciousness and obsession, unless you have questions. Ralph said, I guess not. They said, and I have plans of my own through the years. Ralph noted, whispering. They said, so that all the material will be produced that will be of most benefit, with your willing help. A hearty good evening. Ralph said, thank you. The same to you.